Welcome everyone to the Catholic Quest YouTube channel. Today we will be discussing the question of, can Christians play video games? The answer is yes, we can. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Okay, maybe I should expand on that. In the background of this video, there will be some Valorant gameplay of just a match that I had, and that's just background footage. You don't need to watch it. Please don't mention in the comment section how much knife skins cost and all that in Valorant. I know, it was a moment of weakness. I bought it. I'm sorry. Now on with the video. The first reason is, why not? You know, Catholics can play music. They can read books, tell stories, watch movies, shows, create and experience art, etc. But when it comes to video games, suddenly, for whatever reason, we start to question the place this form of entertainment has in the Christian life. Why? There appears to be perhaps one main difference that I've noticed, and that is that video games require physical input and even decision making. Something that, for the most part, movies, music, shows all lack. Now, I suppose the argument goes something like this. Since the video games that you play require input from the player, it means the player causes the character to do immoral things. Therefore, the player intended for the immoral thing to happen, compromising the moral compass of the player. Okay, this is actually a pretty good point that does need to be addressed. The input of the player is meaningless in the instance of games which give you little to no choice in your actions. And by that, I mean typically characters can only make one decision in more linear games, making the input engaging and fun, but it doesn't necessarily require a moral decision on the part of the player. Now, I'm not advocating that you just mash away buttons, not thinking about what the character is doing, but I'll get to that a little more in the video, a little later in the video, sorry. Even in games such as Detroit Become Human, which has the player making decisions which change the action of the characters and the outcome, you are typically given a choice between best, good, bad, or straight up evil. It is only morally questionable when you decide to purposefully make immoral decisions. I suppose similar to real life, right? We wouldn't say life is evil because there is the option of doing a bad thing. So I would say that applies to video games as well. Just because we have the option of doing a bad thing doesn't mean that we can't do a good thing in the game. I would even argue that such games give the opportunity to engage entertainment from the perspective of a Catholic moral viewpoint, just as we would any other piece of entertainment, be it music, movies, shows, on and on the list goes. Besides, in the case of superficial inputs, which the player doesn't have much choice in, how is it that these inputs are any different than inserting a DVD or clicking play on a movie? Just as pressing the R2 button might have the character attack an enemy, pressing play on a video begins the actions of the characters of the movie, whether they are good or evil. I certainly wouldn't say that you're immoral for pressing play on a movie that has some sort of immoral content. Besides, it's not even the case that we are to avoid seeing, reading, or hearing all immoral content. And if that were the case, we wouldn't even be able to read the Bible. But of course, that leads to absurdity, and we can logically conclude that that is not the case. That doesn't mean you just take in whatever. Once again, I repeat, I will go into that in a little bit. I do support, however, that pressing play is a little more removed from the action than pressing R2 to cause a character to punch the enemy. However, that still doesn't prove the moral difference between the two. In both cases, no real harm is truly happening. That doesn't mean we take in anything and everything, because we can sin in our own minds and hearts, which I will now expand on. Some people enjoy the immorality in certain games. This is true. But the same thing goes with certain folks who watch movies or listen to music. We must filter what we take in, especially if we are known to stumble as a result of certain content. For example, if playing, let's say, Grand Theft Auto, I don't think anybody should be playing Grand Theft Auto really, but let's just take that as an example. If playing Grand Theft Auto causes you to want to go out and steal cars, then you probably shouldn't be playing Grand Theft Auto. If you enjoy the very fact that you're stealing cars in the game, while that is less serious, I would still say probably don't play Grand Theft Auto because that's not something you want to necessarily be enjoying. Now, I do want to make a distinction. When I say enjoying, I mean willing an evil act in this situation, not having fun playing a game. That's an important distinction. In addition to that, there are certain types of content that I would argue most, if not all, Christians should avoid. Primarily, I am thinking of pornographic content within otherwise great video games, movies, shows, etc. It is worthwhile to look up a parental guide, Christian review, or something of the sort to better inform yourself prior to engaging in this entertainment. I would also be careful regarding video games which primarily focus on grave sins such as drug use, sexual immorality, murder, grand theft, and so on. Some games almost make it a goal to portray things contrary to every Christian value. I personally stay away from games such as GTA nowadays, though I do grant that you could play GTA and only go racing, right? But I imagine very few people are actually doing that. But similar to how I would avoid games like GTA which take immorality to the extreme, I also stay away from songs which endorse drug use and immoral actions, movies with the same content. Again, filter what you take in. But you just said that no real harm is happening on screen. Yes, this is true. Good point. But I don't want to drench myself in simulated sin so that I might not grow indifferent to such content. Besides, particularly gruesome entertainment can be rather disgusting. If it causes you to sin in your heart or mind, I would argue that you should stay away from that content, regardless of what is happening on screen. Even if that is fake, which it is in the case of video games, I would say stay away from it nonetheless, because what's happening in your mind, those sexual images or urges or whatever, that's not fake. And that could get you into some dangerous territory. Okay, enough about immorality in video games. Some video games have nothing immoral in them. What kind of immorality is Tetris endorsing? Certainly placing shapes on top of each other is not immoral. And there are plenty of people who play those kinds of games, Tetris or other puzzle games. Besides that, there are some other important factors that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about video games. How much time are you spending in these video games? Are you neglecting your other duties or not? Is your number one thing in life video games? Or is it God? But the truth of the matter is, this applies to everything in life. Be it entertainment, or food, exercise, your physique. We can take anything and turn it into our own personal God, which we should do our best to avoid. And I would be remiss to avoid talking about the beauty of game worlds, stories, characters. And the same is true in a way of the opposite, where immoral things could take your attention away from God. Again, it's a delicate balance in which you have to analyze your own life and foundation in the faith. Be mindful of games which endorse sinful behavior. We may want to avoid games which do so, especially if they are heavy-handed. You might think of a game like The Last of Us 2, for example. While I've personally played the game, and I regret it now, looking back at it, but that game, for example, seems to endorse homosexual behavior. which as Christians we cannot endorse. And so, are you playing that game in order also to endorse that behavior? Or are you also giving that signal off to other people around you who might be seeing you play that game? Not to mention the fact that you are buying a product designed to endorse that behavior. And that's also a key difference between that and murder. I imagine most developers are not endorsing murder when you're playing a game like God of War, for example. Now, the God of War franchise might have other issues as well, but that's just an example. Another thing to consider is whether or not your job is to play video games. Then you have even more reason to play. You might have more reason to play more than others, in fact. While others should not play more than like 2-3 hours without impacting the rest of their life, you might be able to play 6, 7, 8 hours a day because that's your job. Your job is to stream. That's your full-time career. Now, for the most part, I've been thinking about single-player games in this video. However, there are also multiplayer games in which you engage with other people, and that can build friendships, camaraderie, and good sportsmanship. If not, then it might be a good reason to get off. If a game is causing you to throw your controller in rage, I would say definitely step away from the game, at least for a little while, if not entirely, if it's a more consistent thing. I want to add that video games can be an expensive hobby at times. Not that it has to be. There are certainly places you could look where you can find video games on sale. And I would just say, regardless of how much income you earn, be careful how much you're spending on video games. Don't neglect your other duties, be it towards your family, towards yourself, or towards society as a whole. And lastly, I think I want to leave off with just the idea that we need to evangelize the culture. Put your Christian analysis of culture into play. Ask questions and analyze the actions of the characters in video games and their motives. Take a look at the game and see what is good and what is not. How can I use this to bring others to God? But also, how can I use this to bring myself closer to God as well? Honestly, doing this has provided some of the most fun I have had in video games. The Christian lens allows us to see the good and the bad in order to keep what is good and throw away what is bad. Now, I don't pretend that this video is meant to be a comprehensive analysis of the issue. However, ultimately, I don't see any real reason that we can say all Christians entirely should not be playing video games. Perhaps some suffer from addictions, and to those people I would say be careful. If you cannot regulate it, remove it. But otherwise, I think I've given some solid reasons to play, and some solid reasons why we shouldn't treat video games as an entirely different beast compared to other entertainment. There's plenty of immorality in Hollywood, and yet we still go to the movies because we filter what we take. Anyways, that's it for me. If you have any other reasons you want to discuss regarding whether or not we should be playing video games, put them in the comments. I'd be interested to see those and read them, and just keep it respectful. And lastly, open up the door when Christ comes knocking. Thank you.